Good morning, everyone. This is a photo of Swami Kriyananda. In case some of you don't know, he was the founder and director of Ananda until his passing April 21st, 2013. And his photo is here today because we just commemorated his passing last Thursday with a program here. So in honor of that, we have him still on the altar for a few more days. These two readings this week and next week are all about spiritual practices. They're all about how do we perfect ourselves? How do we grow and change and become happier? That's the point of this spiritual path. That's the point of all of this striving, is to become free, to become joyful, to experience God as light, love, peace, all those qualities that we long for. Our souls long for that freedom. I had a piano teacher many years ago, and he wasn't the greatest teacher, but I learned something very valuable from him. He was a very good performer. He was very casual, peaceful, and when he was performing for people, very intricate piano pieces. He was a fabulous player. And one day I asked him, how can you be so confident? How do you get that kind of confidence? And he answered something that I think applies to the spiritual path, and I've always remember all these many years later. He said, work hard. Work. And don't let yourself get away with anything. And then give it all to God. And that's what we need to do. We need to just not let ourselves get away with a single judgmental thought, a single angry feeling. I read somewhere in the scriptures, I can't remember where, but it said, if you think that you have been mistreated, you have a long way to go on the spiritual path. Who hasn't been mistreated? And yet, if we think of it in the right way, if we take it in the right way, we remember that, oh yes, there's this thing called karma. What I put out comes back to me. I may not quite connect the dots and know what I did, but rest assured, we did something. So if you trust God and you say, okay, whatever circumstances happen, I know it's for my own good. It's for my growth. And if we look at this life in that way and we see everything that's happening as a gift from God to show us where we need to grow and change, then we can learn a lot very fast. And it's not just the moments when we get the promotion or we have an award or something like that. These are not the great moments of our lives in this spiritual sense. It's when we're stuck in traffic and we're late for an appointment and we start to fume and swear quietly under our breath. You know, when we're frustrated and starting to get angry, and that's the time when we have to go, oh, what am I doing? Oh, I'm trusting in God. Everything works out for the best. I think I told some of you this. I pulled off into a shop just on a spur of a moment as I was driving down Sunrise to get home. They happened to have something that I had wanted a year before, but they were out of. So that was a little boon. And then I came out of the shop, and there was a massive accident. There were broken, beat-up cars, 5 of them, all over the street. We had to just carefully wend our way through this terrible accident. And I thought, thank you, God, you got me safely out of the way of that accident. That's the thing we don't realize, that God is protecting us from so many things all the time. Be grateful for what He is giving you in your life. And the tests that come, those moments of karma that hit us, they are designed to help. At the Thursday night program, I was talking about living in Italy, 1985, for some time, and we were just starting the Ananda work in Italy during those years, and there was no money, none. And we had been given the use of a summer house up in the mountains near Lake Como. The operative word was summer house, and it was winter, cold, ice, and snow. It just was an amazing experience. And I was thinking about that experience in relation to this week's reading, because we can never judge another person, never condemn or judge anyone. And one of the reasons for that was in Como, as I said, did I mention it was cold? There were big, airy, breezy rooms, big rooms, hard to heat, no insulation. So there was this one little room, about, less than the size of this dais. And we would huddle in there and try to stay warm. And we had what they called a bombola. And I think they used that word because it was like a bomb. It was a propane tank with a heating element on it, which always scared me. It seemed like that gas could just go up. But at any rate, we were desperate, so we would huddle around this bombola. And people would get too close and their clothes would catch on fire. And it became so commonplace that we'd just go, "Oh, you're on fire." Just sort of pat it out and go on. And we would huddle together in this little room, about 15 or so of us, and we'd listen to tapes of Swami Kriyananda giving talks. And I remember, I'll never forget, it's the only phrase I remember from all those talks I listened to in those days, but huddled around, and he was saying, everyone in your life represents an aspect of yourself. And we looked at each other. Oh no. So that person who is always negative, who greets every situation with an Eeyore kind of comment, from Winnie the Pooh, the very sad little donkey. There are Eeyores in life. Nothing is ever good enough. That's an aspect of yourself. If that quality was not in ourselves, we wouldn't be irritated by it. We would just be a friend to that person and it wouldn't bother us. So, big clue there. Whenever something irritates you or makes you angry or frustrated in someone else, find the root of it in yourself and root it out and change it. Be free of it. And then you can just be a friend and it doesn't bother you. And then you can help people. That's the thing. I think we go through so much in our lives specifically so that that very thing in us can help other people. It's part of God's plan. Those who suffer from illness or tremendous loss, pain of any kind, you understand that pain, that sadness, that loss, and you can reach out to someone else and you can help them, you can free them. Another important, I'll just do one other thought here. Well, since I'm telling you about Como, I'll tell you one other story. And the moral of this story is find the humor in your life and live there, because that is a happy place to be. And take whatever weird, strange, unpleasant, karmic things that happen, find the humor there. And just remember that. So, as I said, we were living in this summer house, and eventually summer came. And the snows melted, and for heaven's sake, there was a beautiful garden outside that I had not seen in 8 months. I hadn't even known it was there because there was so much snow. And we started a joy singers group, like this little group that sang this morning, very sweetly. And we got some engagements, even though we were up in the middle of nowhere, really. Mountainous, little tiny Italian village. But we put our little joy singers group together, and we got an engagement singing at the Veglio. Veglio was the little tiny village. The Veglio Blood Bank. Very auspicious, great thing that we were doing. And the program was at night, so they had lights that were like you see when you drive past the football arena, just blaring lights. Banks of them, just tons of them, focused on the stage, focused on us. And we were up there singing our little songs. Well, the thing was that these were the only lights for miles around. And all the flying insects from miles came and wanted to explore us. So they were crawling and landing in every opening, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, trying to sing with these bugs everywhere, and trying to smile and trying to keep the words of the songs going. See the humor. Live in that joy. And everything, even though it was uncomfortable, it was unpleasant, it was embarrassing, all of those things, we were so filled with joy that that's what people felt. And we were an oddity anyway. They introduced us by saying, they don't eat meat. They don't drink alcohol. They don't have children. We're like weird people. But you do all kinds of things for God, and that's the thought I want to leave you with. Remember, as this reading was saying, as the affirmation was saying, God is the doer. We don't realize it yet, but that's the goal of everything that's happening to us. We are on the path to realize our oneness with God. Nothing in this universe is devoid of God. God made this universe out of himself. There were no other building blocks to use. It's only himself. Every atom of creation is dowered with divinity, Master told us. We have to realize that presence within. So at our stage, what we do to make that a reality is to say, God, I invite you into my life. Help me in every moment. Love through me. Think through me. Be with me. And little by little, if we keep doing that, we will realize him. Invite him in. Be one with him. Hold his hand through every moment. And you will realize that he has always been there, and he is always there.
The topic today, joined up with the affirmation humility, is an interesting combination, because perfection may tend to make us think of, well, I always have to score 100 on every test. Whatever exam it is, if I don't hit 100, then that's not perfection. And you can develop a lot of angst around that as a kid. It's wonderful when parents have high expectations and high hopes for their children, and I know mine certainly did. We were willed to do well in school, and generally speaking, we did pretty well. But perfection is a process. It's not an end. It's not an absolute in the human sense, because everything in this world is relative, and which is not an excuse, but it is a help in understanding what we're dealing with. I read an interesting quotation that I'll share, and I'll add my own piece to the end of it. Talent hits a target that no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. And what I would add to that is self-realization hits a target that most people don't even have a clue exists, period, let alone that they can't see it. So if you think of that as a kind of a continuum, this world tends to worship talent because talent is visible and it's present. I know in the 1990s, I was a very serious Chicago Bulls basketball fan, and magnetism being what it is, and close proximity, environment being stronger than willpower, all of that sort of thing. Even Nirmala could repeat the entire Bulls roster, all 12, including the guys that sat on the bench typically, all the way down to the coaching staff. Maybe not all the trainers and so forth, but anyway, she had the complete list. But I remember watching them with an eye towards this fluidity, this flow, this perfection. And one of the things, of course, Michael Jordan was playing at the time. Those of you who ever followed basketball or ever heard his name, we would sometimes jokingly say, among basketball players, I am Michael Jordan. Among wrestlers or whomever, I'm so-and-so. But anyway, what was interesting about him was that he had talent, obviously, but there were tons of other players who had lots of talent. What differentiated him were two things. He had determination, extraordinary determination. He also had a work ethic that beat everybody else's work ethic. So he was not only the most talented, but he worked the hardest. This is kind of adding on to what Nirmala was saying earlier about the piano teacher. And in our lives, we look at that level and we see, okay, well, talent is very visible. One becomes very popular, and one either makes use of it or one doesn't. How do you get to the genius and the superconscious levels? because those are the higher ones that most people don't aspire to. In that same article that I was reading where I saw the little quotation, that was Schopenhauer, by the way, who said that talent hits a target no one else can hit, genius hits a target that no one else can see. In that same article, it was talking about the difference between good and great. And there's the saying, perhaps some of us have heard, that good is sometimes the enemy of great. And which again is not a comfortable thing to hold up, but Christ in this reading is giving us. I read the pieces in between where he's talking about, except your righteousness should exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will in no case enter the kingdom of heaven. Again, now that could make you feel very guilty or very uncomfortable or very angst-ridden or whatever. And then he goes through all the different passages. He just finished doing the Beatitudes, giving the Beatitudes. Then he comes to that thing about the scribes and Pharisees. And in between, he goes on, and he gets pretty ruthless in there. If your right hand offends you, cut it off. If your eye offends you, pluck it out. I mean, it's pretty brutal stuff. You know, anybody here cut off their hand or pulled their eye out because it wasn't working out right? I mean, that's not a normal, typical behavior. In many ways, it's fascinating to see East and West joining up, because in many ways, Christ's message was much more oriented toward the East. And in many ways, Krishna's message was much more oriented toward the West. You have Christ offering this very extreme path. You know, cut your hand off, give everything to the poor, take no thought for the morrow, run for the hills, basically. Give it all to God, essentially, is what he's saying. And then you have Krishna, the path of moderation, the middle path, the balanced path. Live your life in the world, but be for God, etc. And they're not mutually exclusive, and they're not contradictory. They just pick up different aspects for the different times. And this article was talking about the difference between good and great. And on a percentage basis, they said the difference is 5%. The difference between good and great is 5%. You could think of that as scoring on a test. You scored 94 or 95 on a test. That's pretty good. You're going to get an A for that generally in most classes. If you want to do great, you got to score 99 or 100. And that 5% takes about twice as much effort as the first 95. And I'm inclined to think that the last 0.5% or whatever to get to perfect takes, that much again, although you can't really quantify these things, because ultimately it comes to how open is your heart. And this is an example that Swamiji gave us and took from Master, and he actually gave us an interesting example of this, because he referred to a story, an incident where Master was talking about the perfection of God. And this brother disciple of his, Debbie Mukherjee, a young fellow from Bengal, was trying to basically say, Master, you're God. And Yogananda was saying, well, you can't, I'm like a little wave. A wave cannot say, I am the ocean. The wave can say, the ocean has become my little wave, but it doesn't work the other way around. And no, but you said, your consciousness is connected with the infinite, therefore you are God. No, well, I'd say he is God. Anyway, they went back and forth, and Swami does this in one of the readings. He goes through that whole conversation, and ultimately what Master said is, or Debbie says to him, it's because of your humility that you are not accepting what I'm saying. And Yogananda very simply said, how can there be humility when there is no consciousness of ego? And that for us is a big, big clue to how to be perfect. Be ye therefore perfect, Christ is saying. He doesn't hold the mark down. He doesn't just say, be sort of nice once in a while, just kind of be okay, I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay, it's all good. No, he says, be ye therefore perfect. I mean, that's a pretty tall standard to hit. But it's not about the outward, it's about the inward. When you offer yourself inwardly, you can experience that, because that you realize that's the life that's living you. Hence the chants that we chose today. Who is in my temple? I am but an empty vessel. Now that's never going to be a very popular message in America, or really frankly anywhere in the world. I am but an empty vessel filled with the presence of God. Most people want to live their lives going, me, it's all about me. There's a phrase that'll probably come to me, but I can't think of it right now. Anyway, we tend to think of, and what we see in the world, what the world worships is that ego. You see the big rock star up on the stage, or you see the big ball player of one kind or another, and everybody thinks, oh, to be like that, wouldn't that be wonderful? Nobody thinks of the yogi off in secluded bliss as, or very few people think of aspiring to that. What it is an inward state. And it's interesting to see that to achieve it, to achieve true perfection, does not just mean to go off and be in solitary bliss. It means to take that bliss and apply it to the world. This is something that Parvati mentioned last week in the Sunday service here, that it isn't enough to have the experience by yourself. That experience also has to be tested in your life. It has to be brought through your life. Sister Gyanamata, one of Yogananda's great disciples, said it this way: it has to be tested. Your realization has to be tested in the cold light of day. That's where it's proved. That's where it's made manifest. And you reach the point where that perfection can live in you no matter what you're doing. Like Nirmala was saying, being stuck on the freeway late for an appointment. It can be in that situation. It can be in any situation. You just simply realize God's perfection is working through me at all times, because I have learned that my reality begins from inside. It's only expressed outwardly. Swami put it in another way. He said, you learn to be a cause and not an effect. So much of life, we tend to feel that, oh, the world is influencing me. The world is pushing me down. The world is doing this to me or doing that to me. And it's the hero, or it's the self-realized soul, the saint, who can say, what can I give? How can I serve? How can I share? What can I offer into this situation to help, to be a positive influence? That's the way that we learn to rise and float over all these waves of life. There's no helping the waves. There's going to be wind, there's going to be storms, there's going to be high waves. It's just a matter of time. If the sea is calm, sooner or later it'll get whipped up into a storm. But we don't have to be destroyed by that. In fact, in the last analysis, we can't be anyway, because our soul is not touched by any of those things. That soul ultimately must shine forth. And Christ gives us that call and that goal. And he doesn't want us to spend the rest of our lives being guilty that we don't feel like we've achieved it. He's just saying, get into the flow of it. Swamiji, Nirmala was saying we celebrated his passing 3 years ago, just a little over 3 years ago, a few nights ago. One of the things that I observed in him is he became an embodiment of something Yogananda said. Yogananda was asked, is there any end to growth? And he responded by saying, no end. You go on until you achieve endlessness. And Swamiji achieved that. I can say that I saw it through my own eyes. His body was failing. His health had deteriorated drastically in the last 10 years of his life. We were with him for 6 or 7 of those years, 7 or 8 of those years, and right directly with him and watching it happen. But his willingness never did. He was always trying to serve. And he finally came to the place where the body really was failing, but his heart and his soul was, he was always serving. Into the last few minutes of his life, he had checked his email and he had responded to somebody. And then came time to go. And it's just like Divine Mother picked him up. It reminds me of the words to the beautiful chant, "When my dream's dream is done. When my dream's dream is done, she will lift me on her lap." And that's exactly what she did. She just hoisted him up. Okay, I know you're going to keep going. Energizer Bunny has nothing on you. You're just going to go and go and go and go. Okay, you have achieved endlessness. Now come and sit on my lap. And that ultimately, in one way or another, for each of us will be our destiny. Divine Mother will hoist us up and lift us on her lap. And remain open and willing and offering into that process, and it will surely come.